Shadow Mewtwo is the final boss of Pokkén and he plays like it. An offensive glass cannon powerhouse with amazing range, frame data, anti-zoning tools, mobility, mix-ups, a powerful neutral and strong defensive options, he can easily run over any opponent very quickly. He does however have the least health of any character at 480 and his special moves all do recoil, which means one mistake can be very dangerous for Shadow Mewtwo. This is more than made up for with his absurdly powerful burst that can get him out of a bad situation and help in blowing the opponent up. The key to playing Shadow Mewtwo effectively is managing your health, support and burst, as not having good resource management will really punish any Shadow Mewtwo player. On screen right now is an image for Pokkén's notations. I recommend screenshotting this image and then referring back to it throughout this guide and saving it for future use.
A is Psywave. Pressing the button will start to charge the move, and pressing it again will throw it, and depending on how long it is charged for will depend on some other properties. Pressing the button immediately without charging it will give you level 1 Psywave Blast, which is a weak but fairly quick projectile. Charging it for a brief moment and then pressing the button again will give you level 2 Psywave Blast, which is a slightly stronger and faster projectile. One effective use of level 2 Psywave Blast is as a meaty Oki right when your opponent gets up. This does have to be timed manually by you though. Level 3 Psywave Blast is a powerful and fast projectile which will shift straight from Field Phase to Duel Phase if it hits. One massive benefit of level 3 Psywave Blast is it will shoot through any projectile in the game due to having maximum projectile priority. All three versions of Psywave are very good for catching sidewalking opponents, so it's not something, so you won't beat it that way. They also do chip damage, so you actually don't want to block this too much. The best way to beat Psywave is to CADC it, but you'll definitely want to counter dash after the projectile is thrown, as doing it too early can get you, while he's charging it, can easily throw off your timing and get you hit.
While countering Psywave is a recommended way to beat it, a level 2 Psywave with its multi-hits can actually snuff most counters, which is good if your opponent starts flashing blue preemptively. It can also be a good call for punishing CDCs towards you. Even if you're a bit slow and your opponent blocks, you'll still get the chip damage. And that will mean your opponent will have to now play a bit carefully around your Psywaves. This will also discourage your opponent from using CDCs, and that will allow you to set up other traps and projectiles. Meanwhile, in Duel Phase, if you're going for a lot of options that are getting punished, and you start using Psywave instead to punish counters, that will discourage your opponent from using those options, and you can maybe get a different punish instead now.
Pressing Y while charging Psywave will give you Psywave Slash, which properties will change depending on how long the move is charged for. Level 1 Psywave Slash does not set up for a very strong Oki compared to level 2. Level 2 Psywave Slash also sets up for a wall splat. Level 3 Psywave Slash, due to it dealing more damage and having the same Oki potential as level 2 and 3, it is the better option. However, it is not very practical to actually land this in a combo. Due to being up high, Psywave Slash does have the downside of losing to crouching opponents. The first set of Psywave Slash is also minus 16, but this isn't a problem since it can be cancelled into other special moves, and it can block string into the second hit. However, the second hit is still minus 16, so it can be beaten by frame 15 command counters. If your opponent does not have a frame 15 command counter, they'll have to use their normal counter attack instead. But if you don't convert into the last hit, you could potentially punish them for it. Or just frame trap them. You want to be careful, however, as the last hit of Psywave Slash is still minus 12. After doing the first hit of Psywave Slash, you can then press Psywave Blast to throw a projectile. X while charging Psywave will give you Vortex. Due to it having blue armor, it can also be very effective for dealing with opponents that try to challenge it by attacking. Also very uniquely, it also pierces armor, so it can deal with counter attacks as well. After the first hit of Psywave Slash, you can cancel into Vortex, which will deter opponents that try to go under Psywave Slash, or opponents who try to counter it. Against Shadow Mewtwo, you can actually backdash, which will be the best way to punish this. For Shadow Mewtwo, the effective counterplay is to go into the rest of Psywave Slash to snuff the counters. It can be grabbed, but this does require good timing from the opponent, and you can simply mix up with Psywave Slash if you read the grab. Due to being -8, it is not punishable, and you can actually avoid several punish attempts with your other tools. Level 3 Vortex is actually +4 on block, so you can use it for some pressure. However, one unique downside about level 3 Vortex that you need to keep in mind is it actually drains synergy, meaning you can't use burst afterwards. However, if you do hit your opponent, you will actually regain the meter and can then use burst if needed. You can also use Psywave Slash for just some safe pressure. If your opponent blocks it, fine. However, after they block, if you delay and then predict them to counter or attack, you could simply cancel into Vortex. And if you hit, you can hit confirm into the rest of the hits to get the phase shift or combo on reaction. Even just using the first slash on block is a good low commitment way to end your offense that doesn't rely on winning a mix-up or burning more resources. Before we talk about Psywave Teleport, we're going to talk about normal teleport, which is 2A, 3A, and 1A. Regardless of which version we're talking about, Shadow Mewtwo will disappear on the first frame and have 26 frames of full invulnerability where he cannot be hit. The main difference with these moves, however, is that back teleport actually has the most recovery, meaning you are vulnerable and for the longest amount of time before you can block. Port or 2A has the least amount of recovery, and forward is in the middle. Also, with forward teleport, you can't actually cross up and get behind your opponent. Forward teleport can be used for getting through projectiles. However, it's not really worth it since unless you get very good timing, you won't often be able to punish your opponent. Instead, you can just walk and jump over projectiles, or CDC them for 3 meter. 2A and 1A on the other hand are typically used as a wake up button against Okizemes. You might think 2A is better thanks to it putting you out of the way and giving you potential punishes, but because of the longer cooldown, it's actually not, and standing teleport will dodge most Okizemes anyway. You will want to be careful with your wake up teleport, since if your opponent reads it, they could easily go for an Oki that is a bit more unconventional but can punish you. Really, Psywave and then block will do Psywave Teleport. Psywave and block while holding back will do back teleport, and Psywave block holding forward will do forward. Typically this behaves just like normal teleport, but you'll be teleporting out of the way in case you accidentally start charging Psywave when you don't want to. In field phase you can go in 4 different directions while charging Psywave with teleport, and it's typically a good idea to avoid projectiles if you don't have enough charge in your Psywave for level 3 to blast through. Jumping while charging Psywave will give you air teleport. Obviously hold back to jump to air teleport back and forward to go forward. However, a massive weakness of air teleport compared to ground teleport is that you don't actually get invincibility until the 23rd frame, meaning you can be snuffed. And obviously you can't block until you land. I mean, it might work if you predict your opponent to punish Vortex. I guess that can work. Or not. Yeah, I'm just gonna say air teleport kinda sucks. 6A is Zen Headbut, which is a lunging move that is primarily used as a combo ender to push your opponent to the corner. A unique property of Zen Headbut is that it deletes weak projectiles. Lastly, it is actually quite decent for catching jumps despite being a mid-low. It is generally better if your opponents start jumping than using 6x. Back A and 4A is Miracle Eye, which doesn't actually do anything aside from giving you some synergy in return for some health. It does actually work with other moves and has a ton of other properties, but I'll go over those individual properties a bit later. 8A is Psystrike, which is a red armoured reversal style move. It has 3 additional inputs that you can enter, and the last hit will always throw the opponent back into field phase. You can just go for the second hit if you want to keep them in duel, however. Mewtwo's Psystrike, it has 2 just frame inputs. The first is when Mewtwo's hand reaches its apex, and the second is when he hits the opponent. Lastly, Psystrike can be used as a wake-up tool against aggressive Oki options and is more reliable than Mewtwo since it has hit stun on the first frame. Also keep in mind, because it is red armour, it can beat grabs and certain Okis. Just bear in mind, some characters and matchups will have ways to actually beat Psystrike, or at least trade with it. Keep an eye on the health bar. Keep in mind that you actually still take recoil from Psystrike, so it might not be the best idea at times. Just bear in mind, as good as a defensive option as it can be, it is still minus 24 and will get you hard punished if it gets blocked. JA is Reflect, which is just a move that has blue armour. This armour makes it an effective move when jumping backwards to completely get out of jail for free while snuffing your opponent's anti-airs. However, you can still be hard punished for this if your opponent has the right set of tools. However, you can avoid a lot of those punishes thanks to the other moves that you can access while using Reflect. If you press the button again, you will get Flamethrower. Flamethrower can actually make you safe against a lot of these punish attempts from your opponent. One downside about Flamethrower on hit is that it actually has a ton of scaling, and so going for high recoil combos often isn't worth it. You can go for one like that if you want corner carry, but it's typically better to go for recoilless combos out of Flamethrower. Flamethrower, however, will lose if the opponent counters, and then they can dash forward and grab you. Also, Flamethrower is a low with some landing lag, so as a result it can be punished that way too. However, if you expect your opponent to counter expecting Flamethrower, you can simply just do a jump back Reflect instead without the Flamethrower. Thunder out of Reflect is mostly just used to punish laggy projectiles with a lot of charge time, or to hard read round start projectiles. However, Thunder in neutral is not a good idea since your opponent will simply just walk back and forward to avoid it, and they can just CA it for free synergy. However, Thunder can be used out of a reset for some combos if you want to keep up some pressure or go for a potential mix-up. Earthquake is a high risk, high reward move that can beat counterattacks unless they are fully charged and the opponent's CADC's out. Earthquake in neutral is also not really a good idea due to it being very slow and reactable and will often get you hard punished. However, if you do land it, it will lead to a very rewarding full combo. Finally, Shadow Mewtwo's final special move is his Release A, which is Recover, which will heal 60 points of health. Being a character who takes a lot of recoil and grey life and has the lowest HP in the game, Recover is a very important tool to have. However, you don't just want to use it in neutral, as your opponent will be able to get a hard punish on you. As a result, the best time to use Recover is at the end of a combo after getting a wall splat, especially if that combo drained a lot of synergy. After using Psystrike here, I kept holding the button to charge Recover, and there. after ending that combo with 8YY, started charging Recover, and healed. Shadow Mewtwo's counter is pretty simple. On hit, it is only +4, so you can't actually get any combos. But if you fully charge it, or it critical hits, it will launch the opponent, and you can just simply use that for a easy setup. At the wall point blank, it won't really launch the opponent onto it for a combo, but from a bit further away, it will. Due to being a mid-high, it can be beaten by slides and anti-airs. Neutral Y will throw 3 orbs as projectiles that will travel in a straight line. Neutral Y is special cancelable, so you can combine it with Psywave Blast for some easy pressure and chip, especially off a level 2 Psywave Blast, but you could also mix up with level 3. This will also allow for you to rack up very easy shield damage. Neutral Y is also forward Y cancelable, and this allows you to get easy confirms that will allow for phase shifts. And you can also do this off Zen Headbut, and even Psywave Slash. However, these will not combo point blank. Y is a move that can actually be activated with Miracle Eye. When they do, the orbs will activate and home in towards the opponent. This works even if the opponent blocks them, and they'll just reappear. This also means that they can better track sidewalking opponents as they will home in on them. However, if the opponent blocks them first, then sidewalks, then they won't track, even if they're detonated immediately after. Whilst it is possible to see ATC these, thanks to the other projectiles that Shadow Mewtwo will often throw, it is also very easy to get snuffed. Another trick is to neutral Y, Miracle Eye, and then grab your opponent. If you try and tech the grab with something like homing, the neutral Ys will keep you safe and even allow you to punish them. Just make sure you aren't doing this point blank against your opponent, since they can then homing and you will get hit. However, your opponent can counterplay you by grabbing as you go for Miracle Eye. If you call this out though, instead of going into Miracle Eye, you can simply cancel into Psywave Slash. This will also be a decent option if they go for counter because you can Vortex. Side Y will involve Shadow Mewtwo throwing more projectiles while dodging to the side, which can allow him to avoid certain opposing projectiles. Like with Neutral Y, Side Y can also interact with Miracle Eye. Activating Miracle Eye will cause mirrors to appear, and depending on when you activate them obviously will depend on when the mirrors show up. These mirrors have a lot of versatility. For example, when detonated, they can block all projectiles except for laser and ghost projectiles. You can also set them up in front of the opponent to box them in for easy pressure and grabs. Finally, you can set them up behind the opponent to make sure that they can't walk backwards. One extremely powerful thing you can do is side Y, neutral Y, and then detonate to sandwich your opponent in between the projectiles. And then from there you can then rack on even more projectiles for easy chip damage and shield pressure. Do this right and you could even break your opponent's shield. Counterattacking these is not recommended because if you go backwards you could end up running straight into the mirror, and forwards could just get you running into the neutral Y. Even going to the side requires very good timing as the neutral Ys could snuff you. One thing Shadow Mewtwo can do after grabbing the opponent and throwing them to the wall is to dash forward and side Y, which will allow for a setup. There's a lot of things that can happen off of this. If it's blocked and Shadow Mewtwo goes into his homing, it will block string. If the opponent tries to wake up mash, then the sidewise will hit, and this will combo straight into homing for an easy phase shift. This can be countered, but if Shadow Mewtwo waits instead of going straight into homing, he can simply grab the counter on reaction. Then counter and blocks, the mirrors are plus 22, which allows Shadow Mewtwo to get some easy pressure.
Sidewide does have low projectile priority until they start moving. While it is a setup projectile, you'll want to try and find spots where you can slip them in, either because the opponent is playing too passive, using the built-in movement to avoid something. You can basically guarantee the advantage, since by the time the projectiles are moving, so can you, and their multi-hitting nature gives you time to confirm the situation and act accordingly.
Y will throw a slow-moving pillar that will advance towards the opponent. It doesn't quite hit from 3/4 screen, but it will hit from slightly closer. And if you detonate it after it hits the opponent, it will phase shift. It does have some pretty good tracking against sidewalking opponents. However, it will completely stop tracking if the opponent sidesteps. On block, it does have a long-lasting lingering hitbox, so if you walk forward, you'll actually walk into the pillar, though this won't actually phase shift you. As a result, after blocking it, you'll want to wait for the pillar to completely disappear before stepping forward, but a much better thing to do is to walk to the side. One thing you can do after a grab that will leave you in mid-screen is to throw out pillar and then dash up and detonate it. This creates a bit of a 50-50 where if you don't detonate the pillar, you can dash up and grab your opponent. If you expect your opponent to mash, you can simply detonate the pillar. Like before, you can combine this with neutral Y and side Y to lock down the opponent. Just keep in mind with how slow the pillar moves, the opponent can sidestep out, so you'll want to use this when closer up. Forward Y is Shadow Mewtwo's primary Whiff Punisher and Lunge tool. This move actually has two different properties. From point blank you'll get the swords, and if it's space you'll actually get the projectile that will hit the opponent. Yes, the second part of this move is a projectile, which means it theoretically can be deleted by projectile invulnerable moves, though that will rarely happen. The only time that this may become a problem is when the opponent is running a support like Whimsicott. And you'll want to keep in mind that it's actually the projectile that will phase shift, making supports like Whimsicott and Pachirisu very good against this move. Even moves with powerful projectile deleting abilities will have to be extremely well timed and often preemptive and not reactionary. Thanks to how fast this move is, it is a fantastic move for whiff punishing, especially when combined with side walking. The projectile parts of the sword can also nullify weak projectiles, which is very effective if your opponent is trying to zone you out with them. Finally, forward Y also hits incredibly high, making it a fantastic tool for punishing your opponent for jumping. Shadow Mewtwo's homing is identical to Mewtwo's, except it does more damage, clocking in for a total of 132 for the full combo, while Mewtwo's only does 114. Other than that, these two moves are identical. Due to the first hit being an uppercut, this means that the opponent cannot jump out after Shadow Mewtwo is plus on block, as it will anti-air. In some situations though, this can actually cause the homing to whiff completely. But this can easily be circumvented by slightly charging the last hit. You can attempt to mix up your opponent by going for this first hit of homing and then grabbing. Realistically, however, this won't work because you are -8. The first hit into the second hit is a block string, so the opponent can simply just mash at that point, meaning they can punish you if you do try to grab, and since you are -8, if you try to pressure them again, you will typically lose. You can attempt to bait this with counter attack, which will work if your opponent just mindlessly mashes. However, if they're a bit more patient, they'll simply grab you instead. The second hit of Shadow Mewtwo's homing also has tremendous pushback, making it very safe and not a good thing to try and punish, unless you're at the corner. It is also possible to react to your opponent going for homing with counter afterwards. And of course, just go into the last hit to frame trap them with everything that isn't counter. If you do expect your opponent to counter, you can obviously just grab them for it. But Shadow Mewtwo is very good at punishing this with his other tools. Due to that pushback, Shadow Mewtwo has a lot of things he can do, between setting up traps for more pressure, simply just going into another homing attack. You can even back off to make it easier to react to panic buttons that your opponent might try to press. JY is a projectile that will travel full screen and even track the opponent from side walking. Will, however, typically lose the side stepping, unless Shadow Mewtwo is very close and goes in the same general direction as the opponent. It is special cancelable, meaning that you can go into Reflect, which allows you to both attack and defend at the same time. And since you can go into Reflect, that means you can also go into JY Thunder, JY Flamethrower, and JY Earthquake. This is already fairly strong. JY is very safe and difficult to consistently punish compared to Flamethrower, Earthquake, and Thunder. This can allow for offensive uses of JY to go over projectiles, as well as defensively to escape from pressure. Do keep in mind that Earthquake will typically only work if you are above the opponent, and if you JY from a distance and jump back, you'll typically whiff the Earthquake. In these situations, you'll want to use Flamethrower, but keep in mind to do it low to the ground, because if you do it too high, you could just end up whiffing it. For JY Thunder, you'll typically want to use that when you're too far away from Flamethrower and you want to punish laggy projectiles. You want to be careful though, because Earthquake is still reactable, your opponent can CA for a lot of meter and then get a big punish. Flamethrower will also lose the CADCs. If you are worried about Flamethrower getting punished though, you can simply go for the JY without using Flamethrower. GX is a dive kick where Shadow Mewtwo will travel forward towards the opponent, but as you can clearly see, it doesn't have as much range as some other GXs. You can actually extend its range, however, by doing an air dash first. However, this GX is still very committal. If you throw it out in neutral, even trying to get over projectiles, you'll typically get anti-aired. You can theoretically use this to try and get over projectiles, but it is very slow and committal and can often get you punished. Another problem that this move has is, because characters in Pokkén are generally faster in field phase, it can be very difficult for this move to actually hit, especially if the opponent is very mobile, and they'll typically get big whiff punishes on you. You can use this move when your opponent is plus and has the ability to pressure you, but again, Jump Back JY does this as well. And JX might decide it's not wanting to be useful to do. Again, Jump Back JY. Also be charged in the air, and when fully charged, it will actually pierce counters. This can be quite effective if you expect your opponent to try and counter JX, but it is possible for them to see the charged CDC out of the way and then punish you for it, so it's not recommended. Y is a 2-input jab and if you go into the third hit, you'll go straight into Psywave Slash. This does mean if you're mashing, the opponent can simply go for a low to punish you for it. But if you bait that, then you could go for Vortex or Zen Headbutt to frame trap. After a 5YY, if your opponent mashes a 2Y to try and you don't want to go for Zen Headbutt, you can instead go for a level 2 Psywave Blast, which will do good chip damage if your opponent blocks and helps you maintain pressure, and if they do try to mash that frame 11, it will frame trap them. If you mash both inputs of 5YY, it will be a block string. However, if you delay the second input just right, it will not be a block string and can frame trap your opponent, allowing for a confirm. If you land a 5Y, your best option is to go for Psywave Slash, which will give you a strong Oki, and it will also allow for wall splats. If you hit a counter attack, you can back teleport to avoid the counter. Another thing that you can do with Shadow Mewtwo's 5Y is the option select. The inputs for this are jab jab, Psystrike, and then quickly press Y again. If you do it right, it will look something like this against blocking opponents. If they block, you can go into Psywave Slashes. You can Vortex. Or you can back Teleport to get out of danger. If it hits the opponent, you'll simply go into level 2 Psywave Slash. However, if the opponent wakes up with any kind of armor, you'll actually get Psystrike instead of Psywave Psywave. If you are struggling to get this down, I'll link a video in the description by Bad Intent, but we'll go over it. 2YY is Shadow Mewtwo's fast Whiff Punisher and premier zoning and poking tool. And this move is actually quite insane for one specific reason. Yep. Longest range 2Y in the entire game, with even more range than Lucario and Mewtwo's. This allows 2Y to be a fantastic Whiff Punisher for low committal moves that don't really seem very punishable, especially if you can space out of them. And if the opponent is just blocking, then you can use it to poke at them from a far distance where they will not be able to hit you in return without going for something very committal. Even if your opponent does have a move that could reach you, it has to be fast, as 2Y will be much faster and snuff them out thanks to it being frame 11. A weakness of 2Y, however, is that if both hits whiff, you are quite laggy and punishable, so that will be susceptible to jump ins. If your opponent is aware of this and wants to jump, just be ready to anti-air them. It is worth noting that the first input of 2Y is cancelable into itself, so you can just use this to poke out the opponent and to try and bait them into walking forward to whiff punish you. After 2Y, either the first hit or the second, you can Miracle Eye in for a quick grab. If you're worried about counterattacks, you can Teleport out of the way. Against command counters, you can use Psystrike. And if your opponent is simply content to block from max range, you can go for Psywave to get some easy chip damage. Or you can punish your opponent for pressing buttons by going into Vortex. If 2Y hits from point blank, you can go straight into Psystrike if you want to phase shift your opponent. When spaced, however, Psystrike will not reach and will just get blocked, which will result in you getting punished. As a result, the better option is to go for Zen Headbutt. What's really powerful here is that you can go for a 2Y Zen Headbutt and then you can go straight for another one which will hit your opponent if they do not block. .8Y is Shadow Mewtwo's anti-air with two inputs where the first hit will actually knock the opponent out of the air and the second will be for hit confirming. If you do use 8Y on the ground, you should never follow up into the second hit because your opponent can simply counter it or duck under it. Even if it is fully charged, it will not pierce counterattacks and will still get you hard punished. If you get the anti-air, you'll want to charge the second hit so it will get the opponent. If you do not charge the second input, you will just whiff and drop the combo. It will always phase shift if it is fully charged. It is possible to slightly charge the second hit so it will actually not phase shift and this will lead to a full combo. Mid-screen 8YY won't get you anything other than a bit of a frame trap with Pillar. However, in the corner, 8YY will splat the opponent onto the wall, which can give you a combo. It is even possible to get completely recoilless combos off of 8YY. 6Y can be broken down into two different moves. 6Y Pillar, which is a projectile, and the actual hitbox of the move, which is known as the Fist. The projectile part of 6Y doesn't actually have hit stun on the first few frames of its activation, meaning that the opponent can block. However, you can combine it with Miracle Eye to zone your opponent out. or to lock them down, allowing you to approach for pressure. If the Miracle Eye part of Pillar hits, it will launch the opponent for a combo. If your opponent is behind Pillar, they typically can't press any buttons because they will get hit. However, if you delay slightly, they will be able to forward dash out of it. This is why you'll want to be careful and not too trigger happy, since your opponent could dash forward and potentially punish you. Especially if you're closer to the power, only their back gets hit and they'll have enough time to run forward. However, if you predict them to run forward, you can simply not detonate the Miracle Eye and whiff punish them. Or you can use 6x to intercept them. Another simple option that can be less committal is to simply throw a Psywave to stop them from running in, which will also be a good option if they stay, since you can get free chip damage. While Pillar does not actually have initial hit stun, meaning the opponent can block it, you can actually circumvent this with an attack boost support like the initial hit of 6Y, the 6Y Fist, will actually launch the opponent into Pillar, which allows for combos. The optimal combo out of 6Y is 6Y, JY, and then 8Y. The tricky thing about this combo is it is actually quite frame tight and it is easy to accidentally drop. You can also get less damage on this combo if you don't get all the hits of both Pillar and JY. If you are struggling with this combo, you can add a Miracle Eye for a lot more consistency. Just make sure that you're detonating the Pillar with the right timing and getting the maximum hits you can off of JY so you get the maximum damage. One thing about 6Y is despite it being a Y button, it is actually considered a heavy, meaning that it will launch bursted opponents. Due to it being a true mid, it is also a very reliable button for catching jumps. As powerful as this move is, it does have a weakness of not being cancelable in any ways, making it unsafe against counters. While Shadow Mewtwo can air dash his JY, he can't do it as an instant air dash super low to the ground like Mewtwo can. As a result, his JY is a lot more limited. As a result, the best use for JY is to preemptively jump over your opponent's projectiles and get a potential big punish. Keep in mind you can cancel JY into Reflect, which will give you Flamethrower, making it a bit of a 50-50 if JY is ever blocked. Flamethrower can be good if your opponent blocks and then tries to take their turn back and you can catch them. However, this can be punished with a counter-attack dash cancel or with another low. And Earthquake can be useful if your opponent tries to counter the JY, as you can catch them. Just keep in mind your opponent could CADC the JY and the Earthquake and get a big punish on you. 5X and 5XX are your standard combo starter with Shadow Mewtwo. The first real main use for it is for punishing DPs and very unsafe moves. As it is unsafe on block, you don't just want to throw it out against your opponent, but an easy way to confirm it is off of a JY. What's beautiful about 5XX is there's a ton of different potential for combos. You can go for simple recoilless combos like out of 8YY, which still does respectable damage. You could go for 6X into Psywave Slash for a strong corner carry and OP options. This can also allow for wall splats. Another cool application of it is that the first hit of 5X doesn't have any scaling or PSP, which means it's a great tool for getting extra damage in for combos or to allow for resets. X is Shadow Mewtwo's primary lunging tool and Whiff Punisher. One of its main benefits is it can be jump cancelled, which means you can use it to get out of the way of certain attacks. You can combo it with GX, which becomes much more consistent if you jump backwards. This means that if you can pull it off seamlessly, you could actually do loops. It is also possible to 6X into Instant Air Dash JY for some specific combos. It is also technically possible to do 6Y into JY loops with 6X. However, this is even tighter than the GX version, and it is much harder to do on shorter characters, so I don't recommend it. However, what makes 6X better than being jump cancelled is the fact that it can be special cancelled, and there's a ton of application here. For example, 6X into Zen Headbut is a true block string, which will mean that if the opponent's shield is ready to be broken, it is a guaranteed easy shield break. If you ever hit a counter attack, you can special cancel into Psystrike to blow right through it, or you can simply teleport. In addition, you can 6Y, and if you predict your opponent to keep blocking, you can simply Miracle Eye into a free grab. If you ever do 6X and then Miracle Eye going to grab your opponent, you can actually react to it hitting and go into 2YY Zen Headbutt. At the corner, you could even supplement the Zen Headbutt for a Psystrike if you prefer to phase shift. Arguably the best application of being able to special cancel 6X is with Psywave Slash. If you 6X into Psywave Slash and your opponent holds block, you can react and back teleport, or you can just go for Vortex, which will be good if your opponent drops shield. However, if you hit the opponent, you really want to try and master this technique of reacting to it hitting and then hit confirming into Psywave Slash. Keep in mind, if you do it too early, you'll get a level 1 Psywave Slash, which will give you a poor Okizeme, and if you're too slow, the opponent will be able to block in time. At the same time, the opponent might block, and in that situation you'll want to teleport back or go for Vortex. 6Xing and then hit confirming into Psywave Slash or just getting out of there with a teleport is very important, and being able to do this on reaction will massively boost your Shadow Mewtwo's footsies and Whiff Punishing game. This also means that if you can hit 6X and then react into Psywave Slash, that you can get easy wall combos. As strong as 6X is, it does have a weakness. In addition to being whiff punished if you just throw it out with no consideration for your opponent, it is also a mid-low, which means it will lose to 8Xs. and it will also lose jumps. This can also be a problem if your opponent does Wake Up Jump, especially if you do not meter your Oki. If you are concerned about Wake Up Jump, you can go for 5Y Oki, which will catch your opponent. Depending on the timing, you could even get a Juggle, which could be even more advantageous. While also being a mid-low, Zen Headbutt is a bit more consistent at catching 8xing and jumping opponents than 6x is, so you can use that in neutral instead if you prefer. While rare, if 6x does critical hit, you can combo into 5Y with Miracle Eye. Underwhelming move. Its main use is to go over lows like 2Ys and 2Xs. A slight issue it has is that Shadow Mewtwo is not actually in the air until frame 5, meaning that this move is not good for beating lows when minus on block. Typically JX is better. If you are struggling with your opponent spamming lows, instead of using 8x, the better option is to typically just outspace them with your own longer range 2YY. On hit, 8x will only combo into 2YY. The other primary use for 8x is as a hard read against grabs, which will allow for easy recoilless combos. 2x is a simple slide that doesn't have a ton of application. On hit, it will knock the opponent down, setting up for a simple Okizeme. The main use for 6x is to go under high projectiles thrown by the opponent. You don't want to be careful because if your opponent baits this option, they can hard punish it. 2x is minus 12 on block, making it unsafe. However, if spaced, it can actually be more safe. And if you get it from max distance, it can actually be plus. X is a very niche move that on paper does not seem very great. It's reactable, meaning the opponent can simply counter it. It's minus on block, and unlike a lot of other Shadow Mewtwo's moves, it cannot be special cancelled. If it lands, it combos into a frame 15, making it perfect to use with 6Y. However, 4x does have one unique application that makes this move all the more better. It can be dash cancelled. Yes, even on whiff. On hit, which allows it to combo into 5xx for better combos. It is also possible to dash cancel 4x during its startup frames, which can allow you to go for a potential mix-up. One practical use for 4x is if your opponent is backdashing your 6x Okis, 4x will catch thanks to it being a much more active hitbox. At max range, 4x can be out of range of your opponent's potential punish moves and combined with 2y for incredible pressure. If you 4x on block and backdash, you can immediately use 2x, which will be perfectly spaced, allowing you to be plus on block, or at worst, 0. 4x backdash actually goes quite far, so if your opponent tries a more long range whiff punish, they will likely whiff, which will give you a very strong whiff punish potential. Lastly, 4x can delete projectiles. However, it's typically preferred just to CDC these projectiles, simply to get meter. Also, you will need to 4x with good timing, since it won't actually deflect the projectiles until the hitbox is actually out, meaning fast projectiles can be difficult to delete. Just keep in mind it does not delete every projectile. While Shadow Mewtwo's GX can be a very underwhelming move in Field Phase, in Duel Phase this move can be absolutely absurd. In defensive situations, it can be a fantastic wake-up button that can get your opponent off you and start combos. Due to the fact that Shadow Mewtwo curls himself up when doing the move, it can even avoid certain high hitboxes. This also makes it Shadow Mewtwo's best throw crush, even more consistent and rewarding than 8x. It can be a fantastic move to escape from pressure while giving you a very strong Okizeme. And in the corner, you can even use it after leaving yourself minus to avoid certain punish attempts from your opponent and punish them for trying to press buttons. If you cross up your opponent in the corner, you'll typically want to go for 5YY instead. If you cross your opponent up mid-screen, or typically from further away, you can only combo into 2YY. GX can still be charged, but in Duel Phase this is not a good idea, since the opponent can simply CDC to avoid their counters being pierced and punish you for it. It's a bit stronger in the corner since the opponent doesn't have room to counter-attack dash cancel. Lastly, if your opponent has a anti-air that is a projectile, Shadow Mewtwo's GX will delete the projectile, making it very dangerous for these characters to try and anti-air. In Burst, 5YY is now a mid-low with an insanely long hitbox that is very disjointed. Very, very messed up. After a 5YY Miracle Eye, you are +2, so you can take your turn back from your opponent and even go for another 5YY. This does mean if your opponent's really scared, you can throw on a ton of pressure, or Miracle Eye at any point to throw out grabs. Being +2 is extremely good, since the only way to stop 5Y is to clank it with a frame 11, but most characters will not have a frame 11 that is a heavy to stop 5Y looping, meaning they'll have to either jump or use a character specific option. Despite being a mid-low, Shadow Mewtwo's 5YY also can catch jumping opponents when plus. However, a lot of characters will be able to jump out. Of course, if you read that, you can call them out with a 6Y, 8Y, or of course a raw burst attack. X isn't as good an option since 5YY pushes you back and Vortex can whiff as a result. But you could also call them out with Psywave Slash. Also, if your opponent's shield is close to being broken, 5YY into Zen Headbut is a true block string that the opponent cannot do anything about. If 5Y hits, I can special cancel into burst attack, and get used to me saying that. GX will now spawn a pillar when landing, which will launch the opponent for a easy burst confirm. However, if you do not have your burst or don't want to use it, you can instead do an unblockable with 6x Miracle Eye Pillar and then grab the opponent. If they attempt to tech the grab, they will get hit with the pillar. One irritating thing about Burst GX though is because it will launch the opponent onto the wall, it can't actually confirm into Burst, or anything really. As a result, if you do land a GX at the wall, your best option is to just back off and put on some more pressure with an Okizeme or setup. The pillar will make this very hard to try and whiff punish and dodge this move, but the best way of dealing with it is to counter it on reaction. Just make sure you hold down the counter all the way. However, Charge GX will still pierce counterattacks, so it can be a good thing to do if you call out counters. However, due to the long charge time, your opponent will have more than enough time to CDC back and whiff punish you. Which is why the charge version is much better at the corner. While 6x does not change in burst, it is another move that can combo straight into burst attack. However, this can be hard to hit confirm on reaction and is better used as a punish. If you do ever 6x your opponent, and you can go into Miracle Eye into 2YY, which also burst confirms, and is a lot more easier to react to. In Burst, 6Y now does hit stun on the first frame, which can again allow for a burst confirm. However, this will not apply if the opponent is also in Burst, unless you are bringing a support like Eevee that will give you an attack buff. Burst 6Y also allows you to do the unblockable. 8x is now a much more powerful move, which will also allow for burst confirms. However, if 8x hits an opponent that's already in the air, it will air reset them so your burst won't actually combo. While rare, if it ever does happen, you can set up for pillars. What makes 8x extra powerful though is the fact that it is +4 on block, meaning you can 2YY to trap your opponent. And of course, if they are scared of that, you can instead just dash up and grab them. Of course, a good option to beat both of these scenarios is to jump back. But of course, you can hard call this out. You can also do the unblockable with GX off of 8x as well. Counterattack also does not change in burst, but it leads into a burst confirm when fully charged, and uncharged as long as it crits. 2x is now a much better button that will knock your opponent down for an Okizeme. If you whiff a 4x, then you can make 5y perfectly meaty. Also, just like with 8x, 2x will now be plus on block regardless of your spacing. Which when detonated with Miracle Eye will do 50 points of chip damage. Psywave mirrors will also last 4 seconds instead of 1, giving you even more powerful mix-ups, grabs and shield break setups. Another horrifying thing Shadow Mewtwo can do if his burst is about to run out and he has not used his burst attack is to set up the sidewise and then go for the burst raw, which will do massive chip damage, while the mirrors actually prevent Shadow Mewtwo from getting punished. Shadow Mewtwo's burst attack is minus 20, so it is very unsafe to go for point blank. However, it will be safer when spaced, and you can do it to get some little chip damage if you're about to run out. Another very nice thing about Shadow Mewtwo's burst is the fact that it hits well up high into the air, making it a fantastic anti-air to either react to a jump or preemptively catch one. However, if you get the very outer hitboxes of the burst, you will not actually go into the animation, so it is recommended to try and be as close as possible. Shadow Mewtwo's powerful defensive options and great neutral help his survivability. He complements resource management and will benefit a player who knows when to spend resources, rewarding them with the incredible power of his burst. However, his burst does need to be used carefully, as using it at the wrong time can be very punishing. If your opponent is close to getting theirs and has options to fight back, space to run away, a support that can force you to try and play around it, it can make you waste your burst. You only have it for 8 seconds and you need to make the most of it, either with chip damage, shield breaks, unblockables, grab mix-ups, or landing a burst confirm. His neutral in field is all about using his projectiles to force a reaction or to chip your opponent for a potential shield break if they are playing too passively. These projectiles will allow you to get forward Y with punishes, or using JY, Earthquake, or Flamethrower to punish your opponent for throwing projectiles, while getting up close to them to box with homing and using JY to reset neutral, or to punish your opponent for a phase shift, which will always be rewarding since it will give you a lot of meter and burst, which is why winning field is so important for Shadow Mewtwo, since it also denies your opponent their burst, which makes it easier for you to snowball them. Duel Phase is understanding that Pillar warps every matchup, and how your opponent will play around it. If they decide to let you just take recoil and play passively, you need to not play into that too heavily, as you burn your health needlessly since you may not get time to recover. If your opponent is trying to avoid Pillar and get in, you need to try and punish not only aggressive panic rush-ins, but more difficult slower walk and blocks, while not being too trigger happy with your Miracle Eye. Zoners who do not want to approach means that you will have to use Pillar to force them to block and not throw projectiles so that you can close in. Outside of Pillar range, you'll be mostly using 2YY to poke at the opponent, 6X as a ranged Whiff Punisher, and 5A for ranged chip damage. Keep in mind all these options lose to jumps. You're going to have to be ready with 8Y anti-airs, or if your opponent jumps back, catching them with Pillar. Once you get your opponent to the corner, you'll want to find the chance for wall splats, either for a reset or to put them back in the field for a chance to win more meter or deny your opponent from getting their burst. Usually, it is better to be as recoilless as possible in your neutral and combos. You aren't spending time using cover and instead going on the offense. If you are missing health after a shift, get it back, but also remember there are times when spending health for damage is worth it, especially if it will kill. Just keep in mind, if your opponent is enraged, you deal less damage, so spending health might not be worth it. It also means you can go for a combo that will phase shift in order to heal and try to get meter back for another burst. For support options, you could go with supports that heal you, but you do not want to rely on those since that could force you to use them at inappropriate times if you're missing too much health. Frogadier can make your zoning in field phase and neutral, while with Pillar even stronger. Eevee giving extra damage and Pillar hit stun, Krogan being a powerful trap in field, making Pillar impossible to run through in duel phase, or trapping your opponent in the corner during your burst, while also giving them a defense drop, making them even better for snowballing. Mismagius will improve your neutral and Pillar game, forcing jumps to anti-air and a shorter length attack boost to help with Pillar. Dragonite for shield breaks and stalling your opponent's burst to leave them defenseless against yours. Victini similar to Eevee while giving a little extra meter and allowing for powerful blow-ups. Umbreon is a get off me tool so you are not forced to use your burst to escape, and taking your opponent's meter so that you can burst and they can't. And finally, Mimikyu is good for pressure and a potential attack boost. I want to give a massive thank you to Mewtater for helping me with this guide, fact checking it and making sure I did not get anything wrong. I'll leave some of his information in the description, but he did have a message, and that was stream Chappell Roan. Okay. But if you did enjoy this video or found it helpful, I'd really appreciate you sharing it around, giving it a like, and subscribing for more Pokkén content. Now that this video is done, we can get back to normal weekly Pokkén videos, so look forward to that. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.